Okay, Steve, we are officially live if you want to go ahead and adjourn the meeting.
Okay, thank you. Good evening, everyone. Hope everyone is doing well. I'm calling our meeting to order. Before we get to public comments, I just want to note, after we approve the meeting minutes, I'm going to give our commission a brief update of the presentation I gave yesterday to City Council, along with some of the key feedback that we received. So, do we have any public comments for items not on the agenda?
Steve, I did not receive any comments.
Okay, thank you. Can I have a motion? We have two meeting minutes to approve tonight. So can I have a motion to approve the meeting minutes of August 11th?
You need to ask if there's any changes to the minutes before we can approve, motion to approve.
Well, thank you, Marcia. Is there
You're
any
welcome.
changes to the August meeting minutes that anybody would like to see made?
No.
Okay, if not, would someone like to take a motion to approve the meeting minutes?
Move to approve as presented.
Second?
Second.
Okay. I guess we'll just do a visual. All in favor?
Or
All opposed? Okay. Is there anybody have any corrections, changes to the September 8th meeting minutes?
Move to approve as presented.
Okay, second?
I second.
All in favor, raise your hand. Okay, thank you. So approved. I'm going to just give you a brief update. Yesterday, I presented our recommendation to City Council relative to the funding of the the management of the 46 stormwater basins that reside on Dublin property and managed by the HOAs. So overall, first of all, Chris, you want to be sure that I let everyone know that she's very appreciative and thanks us for our work at C-Sac on this initiative. And overall, we see very favorable comments, and everyone seemed to agree with our recommendation. A couple of other comments was they felt perhaps we may get a lot of applications in the beginning because we don't know the demand. But they did feel that, you know, the sooner the city or an application could be processed and a water basin was worked on, it'd be better for the city in the long run versus waiting till there's some catastrophic issue with that stormwater basin and, you know, wait till later to get that fixed. So they're hoping if there is some work that needs to be done, you know, the HOAs will bring it forward through our grant program. They do realize they have to identify criteria for selecting the applications because there's only going to be X amount of money and so much allotted per application. And probably the best thing was the recommendation, I believe they voted on this, will be forwarded to the City Council Finance Committee, and they'll determine how they'll fund the grant program along with implementing the grant program. So overall, it's very good. I should add a Kirby started off giving a little history timeline of the things we did as a C-Sac, as a commission over time on this whole stormwater management initiative. So Nick, I know you have anything you want to add since you were there too?
Nothing really to add, Steve. The only thing I'll say is ultimately, and you probably mentioned this, but ultimately it was referred by City Council to their finance committee
Right.
to sort of formulate the actual program. So I think what will happen is staff will bring forward a framework based on a lot of the discussion and the input that was provided here by the commission. I have those notes. I know sort of what was carried forward in these past couple of meetings, and we'll make sure that that's reflected when we bring forward that recommendation or that framework to the council committee. And then ultimately, I think that council committee bring forward their recommendation to council as a whole. So, as it goes through that process at each of our meetings, I'll continue to give you all an update as that sort of moves through. But I think I thought that was an appropriate direction for council to move, since ultimately, we didn't really bring forward any specific parameters, which I thought was appropriate anyway. So, I think it ended up where it probably should have been, and we'll continue to keep you all updated as it moves through the process with council.
Right. Thank you. And if I could just also add that city's going through the process of finalizing the operating budget, so our timing is very good. So they'll throw this into the pot too, the amount of money required. So with that being said, I'd like to move on to our mobility update. We have a guest speaker who has, for some of us, we've seen several times over the years. JM?
Yes, good evening. Thank you, Commissioner Dritz. My name is J.M. Rayburn. I am one of the city planners for the city of Dublin. I've spoken to this commission a few times before, and tonight I'm going to give you an update on mobility initiatives and projects that we have underway in the city. I'm going to share my screen because I have a presentation. So 1 second, please. All right, let me. All right. Ooh. Okay, that's not working. Here we go. Sorry about that, everyone. Okay, we're good. So picking up with the presentation, the outline tonight will be me giving you an update, a background on the mobility study. There are 5 areas that we focused on, and I'm going to give you an update with each one. I'll provide next steps so you have an idea of where the direction we're heading in. And I'll pause after each priority area to give you an opportunity to ask any questions or any clarification of information. It is going to be a lot of information, but I think the presentation is easy to follow. So feel free to ask questions on the spot as well. If you don't want to wait till the end of the section, that's perfectly fine. I hope this is more conversational than me just giving you a presentation. And then at the end, we can reserve some time for additional feedback and discussion if need be. So as we dive into it, this Dublin Mobility Study began back in 2017, and its scope is to be the city's strategic plan for innovative transportation network improvements, which is to support the community's evolving mobility needs. So think about aging in place, thinking about people with disabilities, how can we better serve these populations, and also the workforce. That's becoming more of an issue to make sure that we're competitive as a city. We began this, and I should back up a second. The Dublin Mobility Study is a multi-phase effort. So we are in phase 4, but we began in phase 1 back in 2017. There was a very large public workshop. Maybe some of you attended it or provided input back then. And we had stakeholders from here in the city of Dublin, but also regionally, thinking about partners that we work with on mobility. From the input, we're able to craft a vision and key objectives, and those were further articulated as we focused on the strategic priority areas. And as I said, there's 5 of those. So in the phase 2, we were able to drill down a little bit deeper and prioritize where we want to start investments with an action plan. And this was all connected, or I shouldn't say connected, this was all part of the connected community theme, which City Council outlined at the time, and we're continuing to carry that theme forward. Phase 3 was, the hallmark of phase 3, I should say, was the implementation of pilots of the strategic priority areas. And we also began to pursue grant funding and private sponsorship, which is very exciting, and we want to continue to look for those opportunities. As I said, we are in phase 4, and this is a phase that is taking those pilots and all the input and tweaks that we want to make and transition them to full or permanent mobility programs, thinking about the long-term sustainability of these programs and their impact on the community, and continue to identify funding to support it. So the goal here is to continue to look for efficiencies with the pilots and as we transition the full programs, but also we want to make sure that we're meeting the vision and the needs of the community. So it's important for us to touch base with commissions like community, like C-Sac. And we do give regular updates to the Public Services Committee on Council. So it's exciting, and I hope that at the end of this, you'll have a better understanding and will support a lot of the initiatives. As we think about the key objectives, I do want to touch on them. First and foremost is to support economic development. And after that, we want to promote equitable access to mobility options and expand those options. And we believe if we get more people out of driving single occupancy vehicles, whether it be for commuting or trips or what have you, if more people are biking and walking and active, we believe that will improve public health. The last one, it says preserve our environments by focusing on future growth. That really speaks to all the new developments or all the new opportunities for developments. We want to try our hardest to make sure that they're mixed use, walkable, easily accessible with mobility options, while also preserving some of the communities, or I should say, some of the neighborhoods and characteristics that make Dublin what it is today. So we want to make sure that we can balance what we have, but also position the city in the future for mobility needs and quality of life. As I said, the priority areas are further articulation of the key objectives. And I'm going to go through all 5 of these and provide opportunities to pause, like I said, after each one. The first one we're going to talk about is microtransit, and you'll know those most commonly as shuttles and circulators in the community. Shared micromobility, it's a very industry jargon term for bike share and scooters. That's basically the big takeaway here. We're looking at concepts for mobility hubs. And these are important because mobility hubs are areas that you can co-locate at least 2 different modes of transportation. So think of transit service and a bike share or something of the sort. And you can also transfer between different mobility options at these mobility hubs. So they're important as part of the bigger solution and network. We're going to look at wayfinding on shared use paths. Dublin is very unique in that we have, I think, over 130 miles, probably more than that, of shared use paths. And it's quite a system that we can leverage with other regional trails and initiatives underway. So it's very exciting to get into that realm. And finally, we'll touch on complete and smart streets. These are more policy focused, and we lean on the Mid-Ohio Regional Planning Commission, or MORPC, for these. And we try to align or adopt what they think are best practices in these areas. So I'll touch on that as well and think about next steps. Are we good so far before we dive in? Okay. So microtransit is really important, and we are focusing on 2 different areas of service. Like I said, it's looking at aging in place and those with disabilities. So how can we provide mobility independence to those who can't drive, or perhaps they need other options to get around town other than relying on a vehicle? For the workforce, we really want to focus on first and last mile connections. And the way this works is we pick up workforce riders from CODA bus stops in and around Dublin, and we bring them to their employers within the city. And this is something that is worth talking a little bit more about, because we talk to some of these employees that are looking for really good jobs in Dublin and some of the challenges they face. And we heard that, anecdotally from some feedback, that some employees are spending between $200 and $400 per month just on Uber and Lyft to get from Dakota bus stops to their places of employment. And we saw that as a red flag for our competitiveness and as a region. We thought if we could help lessen the burden, that would make Dublin more competitive for all sorts of jobs along the spectrum. And so this is really important for us to focus on. And it's been exciting to see the impact and how it's been able to support businesses at the same time. We are piloting a new approach, which is a hybrid of the 2. And that's to better serve people who live in Dublin with disabilities and also have employment in Dublin. So there's one rider that works for, I want to say, Heartland of Dublin, which is a healthcare facility, but they do have a developmental disability. So we're able to provide safe and reliable transportation so they can have a productive life and contribute to the community, which is really exciting. I do want to touch on how we've been able to address the COVID pandemic. We did have to discontinue our senior disabled shuttle service on March 17th I'm happy to report that we resumed it October 1st. We had a lot of stir-crazy seniors in our community, and so we've been working with their point of contacts and their, the senior care facilities to make sure that we can accommodate their needs right now. We couldn't provide that service because it was too much exposure to our most vulnerable people in our community. So we came up with this idea with our community partners and our operator share on a delivery service. We would pick up boxes from the Dublin Food Pantry that were filled with food and some essential goods, and we're able to create a schedule of different delivery services to pick up these boxes from the pantry and deliver them to different senior communities. And so we have some pictures that we try to snap along the way just to tell our story, and it was very well received. While we did resume the regular operations for the senior and disabled side, we do continue to provide delivery services because we're not quite out of this pandemic yet. So we're trying to accommodate the needs in all different ways. So the service has been very flexible, and we'll touch on that, which has been a strength and I think a positive outcome. We have some data going back to the past 2 years. I want you to keep in mind that this data encompasses the very early days where we were very inefficient and just trying to get, some sort of, for lack of better words, hit the rubber to hit the road. We tried out different circulator routes, and we looked at other options. As the technology and software improved, we were able to get better efficiencies as ridership improved. So just take that into account as you look at these numbers. But I do want to call out a few. We have been able to get about 8,800 miles off the road. So that's a single occupancy vehicle miles. That's people who drive to work by themselves or run errands by themselves. They're clogging up the roadways. And while we hear, the biggest thing we hear in public meetings is traffic, traffic, traffic. So this is a good thing for the community. That means that our roadways are a little bit less congested if we can get more people to carpool or take these transit or microtransit services. We currently have about 211 unique riders or active riders, and they are being serviced to about 89 destinations and participating employers in the community. We have been able to spare or divert just under 7,000 pounds of CO2. So if you're concerned about emissions and the quality of air, that's a good thing. And we've been able to free up parking as well. So we're tracking all this data, and it's something that council wants to see more of, and we're happy to provide it. And we've been working with Shared on a dashboard that's internet-based, and that will be a public-facing dashboard. Right now it's facing inward for staff as we continue to tweak it and fine-tune it. But we're excited to have that displayed on our website somewhere so anyone can, at any time, track the data and go through the numbers. So I think that's kind of cool for transparency. I do want to touch on some top destinations or top drop-off locations. I don't know how well you can see this map, so I do apologize, but I'll just walk you through it a little bit. The top destination is the AC Marriott, and that's really the workforce side of things. The staff there is, sometimes when we think about custodial staff or maybe some support staff or administrative staff, they're looking for jobs that maybe don't have the resources to get to Dublin safely and quickly and efficiently. So if we're able to pick them up from different CODA bus stops, it helps them out. It helps the AC Marriott out. So everyone, it's a win-win in that sense. And it's been able to support a lot of businesses as well to keep our community vibrant. Other top areas are Walmart and Kroger, and that's speaking to the senior disabled side of the shuttle services. But as you look down the list, you'll begin to see there's a clustering of destinations. There's a clustering around Tuttle Mall as a big pickup and drop-off area. Some of that's the workforce transferring from CODA bus stops or CODA service. Some of that's just the retail amenities and things at the mall. We have a cluster on Avery Square, so think of Kroger and Giant Eagle and all the retail amenities there. And we have a clustering around historic Dublin and Bridge Park. So a lot of retail destinations are important to the senior disabled side. And then the workforce side is reflected in some of where the dots are, where businesses are. We do have an app. So let's say you're interested in this or you want to explain this to somebody you know. We work to have the ability for you to schedule rides either through calling in, which is very important to our senior communities. But if we can have them, we prefer to use the app. It's easier to track data and it's much more efficient for the system. So we've been working with senior care facilities to train staff members as point of contacts to help book rides. And on the same side, on the workforce side, we've worked with AC Marriott, let's say, ship supervisors that can schedule rides, particularly for their employees that don't speak English as a first language. This is very helpful for them as a tool to retain those employees and make sure that they're contributing to the overall operations. We do have some branding that we've been able to incorporate into the app. So moving forward, I keep on saying, workforce side, senior disabled side. To the public, it's going to be known as the Dublin Connector. But between us, just to explain the operations, I want to make sure I explain that little nuance. One thing I do want to call out before we move on to the next slide is trip planning. So their app with the latest update, Share's app has the ability to, let's say you want to go car free for a day. Maybe every Friday you want to go car free. It will work with you on what are ways that you can go car free, whether it be microtransit or some other mobility options. So I think that's kind of cool to explore and see how that algorithm continues to be refined, and see if we can get more people to get out of their cars and try something different. I do want to touch on challenges and strengths with you because it's a learning curve. We are a trailblazer in many respects in the region when it comes to providing microtransit. And for that, we do want to share our successes and areas that we have some hurdles that we're still trying to get over. But I wanted to share that part with you as well, so you have a better understanding of how this all works. With the challenges, the COVID-19 pandemic has definitely been a challenge. We've had to retool our service and think about how we can better serve the needs of the community with the circumstances. Because of that, we've had limited CODA service to Dublin. CODA maybe wasn't the most connected to Dublin before the pandemic, but certainly when the shelter-in-place order took place, a lot of service was discontinued for a duration of time. And it's been coming back, which is good. But for the workforce side of things, that's definitely been a detriment to being able to pick up people and take them to their offices if they still have to report to their office. We have seen that some of the white collar offices, so not thinking about call centers, but thinking about more of the corporate offices, they have not returned yet to work. So that's an area that we're not be able to serve, but we hope as people come back to work, we can serve them in the coming months. Funding and grants, we won some money last year and it was awesome. However, we also had some of that money taken back, which was not awesome. We won about $50,000 for the senior disabled side, and we're able to use that money to pay for the delivery services as well, which is great. So we'll be able to get a lot of that money recouped to us for the year. On the workforce side, we did win a grant of $250,000, which was absolutely phenomenal. However, the governor, with his budget cuts, that money was clawed back, and so we were not able to use that money at all. But despite that, we were able to keep the service going, and thanks to the support of City Council and the community, we're still chipping away at it. So we're going to make it work, but it's been a bit of a bumpy road the past couple months. When it comes to the workforce side, I want you to know that we have some challenges. It's really about finding the right person in these businesses and corporations that can be champions of the program. Sometimes it's someone in HR when it's new hire packets and getting the word out of this is an option for you. Sometimes it's talking to someone in the C-suite that can, a VP who says, we need this for our workforce or our organization. And so we've had some mixed success, but we'll continue to work at refining our strategy and approach. We have found out the hard way that if you talk to any company and use the term pilot, they are very discouraged about signing on, because if it's a great thing to have in the short term, but if it's going to be gone in long term, then that's not good for them in terms of retaining employees or providing the service and taking away. So we've gone away from the term pilot, and we're really focused on making this thing a long-term service. It's worth noting that we've been working with economic development to pitch mobility as a benefit of employment. So what does that mean? Think about healthcare. A lot of employers will pay a part or a whole of employees' healthcare costs, and we like them to think about that for mobility. It's very common on the East and West Coast to have your employer pay for some of your transportation costs because they don't have parking as much as we have parking here. But I think it's something that we can continue to pitch, that mobility is a benefit, and we like corporations to pay into a mobility fund that we can provide all these services at no cost for the riders. So that's kind of the long-term pitch. COVID has made that a hard sell right now, but they are aware that that's our sell, and we'll continue to pick it up in the next couple of months. But more to come on that. Let's talk about the strengths. This service has proven to be very flexible and easy to pivot the resources based on the contract that we have with the operator. We're given a bank of hours, and we can really shift between how we want to use that money and where we want to focus resources, whether it's workforce with essential workers or providing deliveries or what have you. So that's been great learning from that. The potential to innovate has proven itself and will continue to innovate the service for its benefit. A good example of this is about a year ago, we had only circulators for the senior disabled side, and we were able to have software upgrades and other things to allow anyone who's aging in place to be picked up at their place of residence, which was a really nice upgrade about a year ago. So as the software improves, efficiency improves, and we're able to dynamically schedule a lot of these routes ahead of time to be the most efficient with the money. So good stuff to come on that and happy to answer more questions. Another strength is this whole service of Microtransit has been very interdisciplinary and collaborative. And I don't just mean between staff and departments in the city, but working with regional stakeholders and partners has been to the benefit of the service. And we've learned a lot from our partners along the way. The data analytics dashboard is going to help us be transparent and improve the efficiency of the program. That's coming very soon, but I will say that it's exciting that we're able to provide this service and transparency, so we'll continue to work at it. And finally, as I said before, the support from Dublin, the Dublin community and city council can't be underestimated. It's, we need the champions in our organization as well, so we're very thankful that they're willing to invest in the community with these services. Before we take a pause, I just want to give you a quick update on some regional transit updates that are happening that you should be aware of. First and foremost, is MORPC and City of Columbus and some other regional stakeholders are looking at the corridors in our region to see if there's opportunities to deploy maybe more high capacity or rapid transit solutions, look at different ways to create a complete mobility system, if you will. So that's looking at technology on top of that. It's looking at bike and ped improvements, and it's looking at land use changes. So as a planner, to me, that says looking at zoning and looking at other development standards that could help create maybe more transit-oriented development along these corridors to support more intense mobility or transit systems. So think of, think of bus rapid transit, think of light rail, think of streetcar. These are kind of the different candidates for mobility investments that we're looking at on these corridors. The first one they're looking at is the Northwest Corridor. So that's great because we're in the northwest part of the metropolitan area. What's not so great is that dotted line on the map, that's where they're focusing phase one of this initiative. And it's basically from Broad Street to Bethel Road along the Olentangy River corridor. So what we like to do, and we told this to City Council, we want to see that dotted line extended to the Bridge Park and Ride, where CODA has park and ride service. That makes the most sense for us, and perhaps there's a east-west connector on Bethel Road, but it's really important for us to be taken seriously, for lack of better words, in the metropolitan area when it comes to these big investments in transit that would benefit our community. And it might create a really nice ride between Dublin and downtown if you need to get there, what have you. So we're working on that. If you hear anyone bring it up, say that Dublin wants to be at the table, so make us a seat or something like that. But it's a great position to be in, but we need to make sure that we're also at the table when we have these discussions on a regional level. So we'll report on that, but I want to at least bring it to your attention. Some other items real quick. Is everyone familiar with the C-Pass program? I don't know if I'm seeing some nods shaking. Excuse me. The C-Pass program was a I want to say collaboration, maybe partnership is a better word, between the city of Columbus, the special improvement districts downtown. So Capitol Crossroads was one of them, and that's basically a geography of downtown that the businesses and landowners pull together and will say, let's assess me, some pennies on the dollar for every square foot, and that money will be put into a pot that can take care of trash, security. Think of like an Easton. It's one property owner, and they can make sure that it's cleanliness, it's safe and secure. That's basically the same thing a special improvement district does for downtown areas where there's many property owners, and they need to think about these things to make it welcoming for people to come. So as part of that, they also have to look at how do we park everyone downtown? And they couldn't build more parking garages because, to be honest, a parking garage is maybe $40 to $50 million a piece. But if you can subsidize free bus passes for a segment of the downtown workforce, you don't have to build a parking garage, and it would be a lot less money, public money, that you can subsidize, free bus passes. So what that turns out to be is the downtown area businesses tax themselves about $700,000 a year to provide free bus passes to about 50,000 employees downtown. So that frees up a lot of parking, but it also creates a benefit. Going back to that, mobility is a benefit of employment. So we would love to see maybe a D-Pass program in Dublin or something of the sort, but it's something that we have to do in partnership with a Crawford Hoying, for example, or other property owners to see if they'll be willing to tax themselves a few extra pennies per square foot to make this program happen. So we're working on this. Economic development is very interested because, truth be told, sometimes parking is a little bit of an issue, at least pre-COVID, when you think about call centers and other areas that have a lot of parking ratio than when those buildings were originally built. So last thing is an all-in-one trip planning and payment app, and that's Pivot. That's been under I want to say construction, but it's been launched and it's continued to be refined, and that's part of the Smart Columbus effort. So we're about to take a pause. That was a lot of information, but I just want to lay out the next steps for you all as it relates to microtransit, so you have an idea of where we're going. The first thing we're going to do, and we're already working on, is to utilize some city vehicles that aren't being used, particularly right now, because no summer camp and no Irish festival and none of these special events. There are these shuttles that are just sitting in parking lots, and we'd like to use them whenever there aren't special events happening as a way to lower the operating costs, but also look at branding opportunities, maybe a full wrap of vehicles that say this is a Dublin connector, and it's a lot more noticeable in the community so people can recognize the service. We're going to continue to push for us to be a bigger player at the table for the Northwest Corridor development and mobility improvements. We're going to continue to beg CODA to be a good dance partner and give us some more service for our workforce, but also for our community. We're going to continue to look for different funding opportunities and expand partnerships to make sure that we can have more riderships and drive down the cost per rider. And then we're going to look at parking and demand management policies, continue to look at data and KPIs, and then further down the road, if we can get a truly on-demand service, because this is scheduled ahead of time. So that is where we're at with next steps for microtransit. I'm going to pause and take a drink because that was a lot of talking. Are there any questions at this time or anything that is a little fuzzy that I can help clarify? A little bit. I'm having problems hearing you. I apologize. Is anyone else able to hear him, or maybe use the chat function?
Yeah, I'll try to speak slowly.
Oh, that's better.
Can you share about any other towns that you benchmark with relative to the different initiatives you're working on, and are we doing better or worse than other towns that you compare to?
Yes. So I think the question was, are there other communities that we can benchmark or we are comparing ourselves to with respect to microtransit and other operations that are similar? Does that sound fair? We are looking at communities right here in Central Ohio. Grove City has a microtransit operations for a while, particularly in partnership with, I think, Obetz and maybe some other communities around Rickenbacker and some of their logistics workforce that's down there. Westerville and I know Westerville they're deploying Coda Plus, which is the microtransit solution by Coda, and they were delayed because of COVID, but they did have a launch. So they're a community that we look at as well. In the city of Columbus, we look at how they're doing, but we try to stick to Grove City and Westerville as the benchmarks for Dublin microtransit. We are in the process of getting together with those communities and talking to them about their experiences as kind of, I don't want to say maybe a summit or some sort of dialogue that we can share our successes and our shortcomings. So I think that's good that when we're benchmarking ourselves with them, but also sharing some conversations about how we can make our services even better for the citizens in all our communities.
Hey, JM. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay. If I'm a worker coming into the city of Dublin, let's say via Coda, can I specify any company I want to go to get transit within the city limits, or do we limit where we drop up people off at?
For the workforce side, we focus on the city limits. There may be a senior care facility or retail that's on the border of the city, which we'll support just because it has an impact. But we do focus on Dublin businesses. And what they can do is when you have the app, you usually have to schedule ahead of time, let's say 12 hours, to say, hey, tomorrow I'm going to be working at, let's say, Stanley Steamer. I'm going to need to be, I'm taking the bus service and I should be, dropped off at this time. So I need someone to pick me up at Coda at this time that I've given you the information for. And they'll be able to incorporate that ride request with other ride requests at the same time. So they're the most efficient routing for those employees. And they give you an estimate of arrival.
And you said that costs nothing for the worker?
It costs nothing for the worker, so that's at no cost.
Right, it's great.
Yeah, for the Coda Plus side of things, there's a base fare of $3. Now, if you use the fixed route service of Coda and you transfer to Coda Plus, they waive that $3 fare. So I just want to say that. But for us, we provide rides to seniors and the workforce and people with disabilities at no cost, and we think that's important if we can maintain that.
And when you talk Dublin Senior Center, is that the Centero or something different?
Centero, but also the Dublin Rec Center has some senior programming and senior space. So Centero is actually a great partner because they've been able to let some of their clients know and customers about the service. But
for Dublin Senior Center, that refers to the Rec Center then?
I think so. I know Centero does some operations, so I can go back and check that with you just to make sure it's clear.
I was really just curious more than anything.
But we do service both, just so you know.
Okay.
Ooh. Any other questions?
It's me. I'm sorry. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay. Just to note, the senior center at the rec center is still closed.
Okay.
And I'm not sure what the plan is to open it right now, but as of last week, it was still closed. So, So people must be going through Centero then.
I think you're right.
I'm not a Uber or Lyft rider of any means, but I was just curious. Do you know what an average price would be for Uber or Lyft for a 5-mile ride?
I don't, because I think it depends what time you request that ride and some other things. I think it's important to note that in the beginning, the cost per rider was astronomical as we were starting to get the operations down and get more people to ride. So the true cost these days is a lot lower than that, but that's that's the aggregate of the whole program. So we have all the early days when it was very inefficient, and that's inflated our numbers. But I assure you that it's lower than $20 per ride these days.
Okay, yeah. Because I was just doing some back of the envelope calculations and looked like it run like 170,000 a year for all the lifts or all the rides that were given.
Yeah.
Is that a ballpark estimate?
We had about $250,000 as our budget, and that was to provide workforce rides, but also the senior and people with disabilities rides. And we were able to get grants to expand the service. So we operate 6 days a week, Monday through Saturday. We were going for grants to see if we can expand hours of operation, but also expand the scope of trips. So for example, medical trips are not included in the service. It's really for quality of life, grocery shopping, other things of that nature. We went for grants to see if we can offer medical trips, because that seems like a great service for the community, and also provide trips to the hospital, not for medical reasons, but to visit friends and family who are in the hospital. So we've gotten a lot of great feedback from our ridership. Another one was providing transportation to places of worship on Sundays. So we'd love to offer that, but that would probably be the last thing that we'd add, because we have to be extremely sensitive about places of worship and government services. So if we offer it, we have to offer it to everybody, and we want to make sure we have the capacity to do that. So that will be something we have to think through a little bit more. But I think for medical trips, it makes a lot of sense in visiting loved ones in the hospital.
Right. Okay, thank you.
Yeah. I also want to add, when we looked at benchmarking other communities, it costs about $400,000 to $500,000 per year to operate microtransit services. And so we are on par for Westerville and Grove City. They spend about that much a year. They are able to subsidize that with some grants that CODA goes for. And we partnered with CODA for that workforce grant of $250,000. So there's great partnership opportunities, but we were able to get council to approve $400,000 for next year, with the intent that we can take these pilots to full programs in line with our other cities like Westerville and Grove City. So it's going to take a substantial investment. Long term, we really would love corporations to throw in some money into a mobility fund, so to speak. So if we can get like Wendy's or IGS to contribute $50,000 a piece a year, I mean, if we get a few corporations, it really can be paid for quite easily. Just right now is not a good time to ask for that kind of money. All right, if there aren't any other questions, I'll move on and we can save it for the very end. All right, so let me get back. All right, so now we're going to talk about bike share, or as the industry, it's known as shared micromobility. We're looking at 2 different bike share options for the community moving forward. The first one we hope to launch is called Trip Bikes. These are the bikes that have the fat and the big tires, and they're electric, or the e-bikes. So they have a pedal assist, which makes it easier if you're going up hills, or just in general if you want a little boost to keep up with your friends. But they also have a little thumb throttle as well, which is a lot of fun. Nick and I have ridden these, and I think they're a tremendous amount of fun. I think they're a really cool way to experience the city. They have to have their tires painted, because otherwise people think they're motorcycles or mopeds or something of the sort. So we have to make some visual cues to make sure that everyone knows that they're electric bikes. So we're working with a company that's based in Columbus, Trip Bikes. And we hope, like I said, we hope to launch this next year. Nick and I are working on meetings with them to just nail out the details. So it's exciting to see that come to our community. These bikes would be for residents to use, but the business model is really geared towards hotels where people are staying and don't have a bike, but maybe they want to go for a longer bike ride on our shared use paths, or go to the Metro Park or something of the sort. There's a lot of opportunity for that. For the Kogo bike share, that is something that is in other Central Ohio communities. So it started in Columbus, but it has expanded to Upper Arlington, Bexley, Grandview Heights from there. We are working with other communities to apply for a grant through MORPC for federal dollars that would support the expansion of COGO into the northwest quadrant of Franklin County. So we're partnering with City of Columbus, with Hilliard, and Columbus, Hilliard, Upper Arlington, and the metro parks. And we want to submit a joint application with these other entities, because that would really help our chances of getting that federal money. They love to see coordination and cooperation between municipalities. And if we partner together on some money, that really raises our chances of getting that kind of funding. So if we do get the funding, it would pay for about 80% of the total costs of the bikes and stations, which makes it a lot more affordable for us to deploy in Dublin. But we really need it to be deployed in Upper Arlington and Columbus so we can have a good connection to Dublin. We can't really have an island with this kind of bike share system. So that's exciting. It's going to be a couple years down the road because this money, the grant cycle is every couple of years. And the first thing we have to do is finish a public input phase. And we're doing that with Ohio State students in the beginning of next year in a studio. And they're going to work with us. They're basically going to be, we're going to be the clients, and they're going to be consultants. And they're going to have all these public workshops for us. And it's going to be a heavy lift. But they'll be able to get public input on where stations could be located as part of our grant. So that's a huge lift. We're very excited to partner with the university on this. And we will finish that first phase next year, and then that will position us for an application after that would to get some of this money to expand this bike share. I did include this slide because one of the city council members asked about it, and I thought it might be interesting to share with this group. There was a question about, what is ridership going to look like in times of pandemic? Are people going to ride bikes? Are they not going to ride bikes? What is the data going to say about this? So we were able to reach out to COGO, and they said on average, they've been doing about 4,000 rides per month between March and June over the past couple of years. This year, they saw a bump of 29%. And I think that was because CODA services were discontinued in the early days of the stay-at-home shelter. People still had to get places, and maybe they didn't have a car. So this was a good tool for people to get around town, outside, socially distant, and it was seen as a safer way, so to speak, to get around. So it was great to see this data. We're going to continue to follow this, but it could help our chances of getting the bike share money as a way to, promote a safe and healthy way to get around town. So next steps, I'll pause in a second. Next steps are to continue to coordinate the launch of Trip Bike Share next year. We're going to also complete the public input phase for the COGO expansion grant that we're going for. And we want to make sure that city council and our staff at the city are flexible and can contemplate code revisions to accommodate new shared mobility options. So if it's scooters, that's great. If something else that hasn't been deployed yet, we just want to make sure we're flexible and we can accommodate new ways to get around town as they come online. So, are there any questions of bike share and shared micromobility before we move on?
Can you go back to the previous slide, the one that showed? Oh, I'm sorry, the first one that has the two different, yeah, that one. Okay, so the trip bikes are dockless. Are they going to offer a service where they're going to pick them up like Lime was supposed to do on a nightly basis, or?
I think, like I said, they're going to be housed at hotels, I think, as maybe hotels and maybe public spaces like the library. So that's the intent, where you can start and complete your trip, no pun intended, at a hotel, for example. So the hotels would be a way where they can store these bikes, but also charge them overnight.
Okay.
And I'm sure you can do that at the library too. So I think it'd be very specific where you'd be able to get one of these and leave them off.
Do you know what the top speed on the trip bikes are?
When I rode it, it was 25 miles per hour, but I was really cruising.
Holy cow.
I mean, a leisurely ride is probably 10 miles, 15 miles per hour, and it's fine. I was going up over 270, and I didn't feel like pedaling anymore. It's tired. So I'm just like, let's just hit this throttle and see how far we can go.
Oh no. Well, does be usable? Do they have to be used on the road then at that speed versus the bike pass or the shared use pass?
I mean, we can work with the operator. I think if we can probably program a max speed or advise the public to go at an easy pace of probably 15 or under. You know, I think that's possible, and that's some of the details we want to work out with them before we launch.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
I actually have two questions.
Go for it.
First question is, just because I don't know anything about this, how do you keep people from stealing these things if they're dockless? And the second question is, it covers pretty much all of the mobility priorities, is how we advertise these things.
Sure. So I know with the dockless bikes, they have an ability to do geofencing, and that's geofencing is a term that you can put an invisible fence around a geographic area, and that can help limit their usability. So they can maybe shut off or something if they cross out of this zone of operation. That's one way to do it. I think another way is you might have to use a credit card as a way to pay. So if it's not returned or something of that nature, you'll probably get charged. So I think they have some mechanisms, but I could follow up with you on exactly what their plan is.
I was just curious.
And then for the marketing, we're going to lean on our city staff for part of that. But also the trip team is out and about. They like to be involved in the community. And so we'll be looking at ways to coordinate different marketing campaigns, but also loop in our city because we have great reach already with our social media as a city. And we can, use some lifts there. But open to other ideas. So feel free to give us some feedback with that.
Hey, I have a question about the safety. Do they have to have a helmet, or the helmet is provided, or it's not even required?
I don't think the helmet is provided, and we can follow up with you on that. Hey Nick, what's the policy? Do we have a requirement for helmets, or is it really based on whatever the user's preference is?
Yeah, so we ran into the same challenge when Lime was here. The state of Ohio does not require helmets to be worn, and so in this type of situation, obviously we want people to be safe. We want to make sure that we're encouraging and educating folks, especially on these e-bikes. If they're going a certain speed, we would work tirelessly to sort of provide that education and the engagement around that. I know that in different situations, and I know JM and I have a meeting set up to chat with Trip here, hopefully in the next week or two. But some companies have provided helmets at stations where you would rent the bike. The nice thing with Trip is you can see it there. They have a nice base to the seat. They might be able to provide a helmet there, so you can certainly do whatever you can to sort of provide a helmet, make sure that people have the option to do it. But from an enforcement standpoint, it gets challenging for, the city on that end to sort of enforce or require people to be wearing helmets when it comes to some of these things. So that is one of the things that has been sort of litigated at the state level throughout, a lot of different states, as far as, are people required to wear helmets or are they not? Can communities require people to wear helmets or not? And that's something that we've had conversations with our legal team as well. Because certainly we want to make sure that folks, while we want people to enjoy themselves when they're here and when they're participating in these things, we want to make sure that they're being as safe as possible as well. So yeah, that's certainly a topic that we've debated previously as well. So we would certainly work with Trip and Kogo and others to promote and encourage folks to wear helmets. It just starts to get kind of challenging when we get to the point where we want to say we want to require folks to wear helmets.
And then, are they going to allow these on the bike paths or the shared use paths?
Steve, that's certainly a question we would have to, that's something we'd have to work on down the road. I think from staff standpoint right now, our goal would be for folks to be riding them on the shared use path. Now, I think that what comes along with that is, we would be working with Trip to make sure that they, they have a max speed of say 15 or 20 miles an hour. We have specific goals and things that we want to make sure that, they're sort of not exceeding. So, certainly if they're keeping them under a certain speed, and that, at least in the last time that we had a conversation with them, they were very confident that that's something they can govern with the devices inside the e-bike. If we say, hey, in our community, we want people to be using these on the shared use path, not necessarily on our roads, have a lot of high speed roads, and we have some concerns around that. We only want them to be able to max out at 20 miles per hour. I think that the last time we talked to them, they were pretty confident that they could keep it to 20 miles per hour or 15 miles per hour. And that's something that these scooter companies as well are able to do. So when you talk about some of that geofencing, this is another thing that can be folded into that as well. So it could be something where we say, hey, in our, the downtown Dublin area where we know, we have a lot of folks in there, we know it can get congested. We don't want the bikes to go over 10 miles per hour when they're in there. We might be able to have a conversation with them about that type of stuff as well. Does that answer your question a little bit, Steve?
Yeah, 25 miles per hour is very fast,
Sure.
especially on a bike path. Got someone's coming around the corner at that speed.
Yeah, I would not recommend going that fast. I went that, I should clarify, I went that when no one else was around me. It was a straight shot.
No, on the street, I have no issue on the street. I just be concerned on our shared use paths.
Steve, we would share that concern as well. I mean, we have our shared use paths are 8 feet wide. We know that they can get we know we get complaints and concerns from folks now with, without, an e-bike service. And so certainly we would have the same concerns, and we would work with Trip to figure those challenges out. And when you talk and think about education, that's something that we would be out in front of, as well as letting folks know this is where we encourage folks to be riding the bikes, understand that they're, it's a max speed of 15 miles per hour, 20 miles per hour, whatever was decided. And those are things that we would vet out in advance, and not just sort of surprise, there are 30-mile-per-hour bikes out there, take them and speed around wherever you want. That's certainly not anything that we would do here in this community.
I did want to mention with the helmets, there may be an opportunity for grants, for safety grants, or if you know any corporations that are looking to sponsor helmets, we can do a helmet giveaway. So I think we can continue to explore, opportunities, and hopefully something will fall into our lap, so to speak.
I'm sorry, just one more. That on the trip bike, is it 2 people can ride, or is just one allowed? This looked like a longer one.
One, I think that might be where the battery's stored. So they just gave you some maybe extra cushion there, but it's for one person.
Okay, thanks. Can move on.
One more question.
Yes.
The whole issue with speed and helmets brought just the liability, the overall liability. I'm assuming this is you're on your own kind of situation.
Yeah, and we would, I know Kogo probably has some language when you sign up for a membership. So we would follow whatever their best practices for liability and stuff of that nature. All right, and now it's going to get really, oh, yes.
Can you hear me okay on this, with this line?
I can hear you okay.
Good. Hey, so this is related somewhat to it. It kind of is more short term, but with COVID occurring right now, and I'm both a bicyclist and a walker on the bike paths, and we're trying to coexist. Is there any thought that Dublin might be able to provide the bikers some gentle reminders, whether it be discrete signs or through social media, during these times, and actually any time from a safety standpoint? A couple of things they should keep in mind. One is to slow down when they approach a walker, and make an attempt to alert somebody in advance that you're passing, because I think using about 75% of the time it's okay. It's that 25% of the time when I'm not being aware of the person approaching me that things get kind of wacky. So I just bring it up as just a short-term suggestion for helping walkers on these bike paths.
That's a really good suggestion. I think Nick and I can follow up with our CPI, our Communications Public Information Department, and we can see if we can do some sort of campaign around bicycle etiquette and shared use path etiquette. That's a good suggestion.
Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. All right, without further ado, I'm going to move on to the next priority area, which is mobility hubs. I may be a little biased because I'm really excited about mobility hubs and wayfinding, so I hope you will be too by the end of this. It's all good stuff, so let's keep it going. Mobility hubs are great because they, again, provide an opportunity to pack in a lot of mobility options in one place, and you can transfer between them. So that's really the good part about mobility hubs. For our community, we are looking to break mobility hubs into tiers, and that is to perhaps help with planning and implementation, but also it's supposed to reflect the intensity of mobility options that each tier has. So with a tier 1 mobility hub, we're looking at downtown hubs or a park and ride hub with CODA. We want these to have the most options possible because this is where the activity is and this is where a lot of people enter our community. And so we want to make sure we can accommodate different mobility needs. When we look at what to expect in tier 1s, the Dublin connector, it's Microtransit. We want bike share there. I'm going to get into bike loops as a little teaser. If you're scratching your head what that is, we'll get to that next. Mobility kiosk is, think of an interactive, component, that maybe a smart component, if you will, where you could look at different information if you're visiting or what have you. So it's really programmable to what you think the needs would be at this mobility hub when it comes to a mobility kiosk. We also provide opportunities for ride-hailing pickup and drop-off, and that can be carpooling as well. As we look at the tier 2 and tier 3, these still have a lot of options for getting around town, but they'll be scaled back and really focused on, where they are in terms of the mobility system. So Dublin, we have a campus community center hub. Think of the rec center. Think of the hospital, the Dublin Methodist Hospital. OSU's ambulatory care center is being built right now, so we want to make sure we connect to them. And then the Ohio University Dublin campus. Neighborhood center hubs, that would be more towards residential settings. So these can be either at maybe the entrance of Glacier Ridge Metro Park, or they can be in Muirfield or other neighborhoods throughout Dublin that would be respectful of the residential context that they're in, but provide opportunity for people to jump on a connector or something else. In the early days, when I say early days, I mean about 2 or 3 years ago, as we started this endeavor, we started doing sketches of what a mobility hub should have, or just think, what are some opportunities here? This is an example of a downtown mobility hub. It's not going to look like this. This is conceptual drawing, so I just want to make that clear. But we want to make sure it had components that would be helpful. So thinking about opportunities for parking bikes, for catching transit. I think, let me explain what some of these are, because a lot of this is industry jargon, but a bike house, for example, would be if you're in Bridge Park and maybe you don't have a lot of storage in your condo or apartment, this can be something where you have like a public bike locker or a bike house where you can store some bikes until when you need them. Or it can be near the park and ride. If you want to ride your bike to the park and ride and then take CODA downtown and then have your bike locked up and safe when you get back home. So things of that nature. But we want to think about a curb, a little bit of a curb drop-off point for transit so you don't congest traffic, and it's safe to get on and off some of these services. So we're really thinking critically of how this can be incorporated into existing neighborhoods and how we can provide the most service to people who need it. I'll give you some examples. So as we're thinking about, a mobility hub can be anything you want it to be, but there are some really good examples for inspiration to look at. Minneapolis is on the left, both of those photos on the top and bottom. You'll see a transit station there, there's bike parking, there's some other amenities, and then you also see a great wayfinding sign at the bottom of that little mobility hub. So that's something that can be found in a neighborhood. It's not very overwhelming. It could be something very small, like a transit shelter, or it can be something that's more geared towards bikes, like in Montreal in the bottom right picture. Columbus, I think this was a good idea. This is the Linden Library, which is already a natural point of congregation for the community. It's a community center in its own right. So to have a mobility hub makes a lot of sense. And we have bikes and we have scooters, and then we have a kiosk, which is that display right in the forefront of the photo. So our next steps, we got council told us to think broader than tier 1. They want us to start on all tiers of mobility hubs. So we'll begin to, we're working with a consultant and some designers on opportunities for each site that we've identified as a mobility hub, and start doing sketches and work with engineering to see what will work. As we're doing this, we're going to continue to engage with CODA and other partners as other opportunities arise. There's been a lot of uncertainty the past couple of months. There's going to be uncertainty moving forward. There's going to be opportunities that we can take advantage of in the right times. And so we want to make sure that we're well positioned and focused on those opportunities, and we can work with our partners to make them happen. So I'm going to stop right here with mobility hubs. Do you all have any questions about mobility hubs before we move on, or feedback? Hearing none.
Hey, JM.
Yes.
This is Jim, and I want to preface this by saying that this is a really very minor question that I have here, but I think it's great that Dublin has supports visually impaired folks with their mobility, like downtown, the downtown hub there. I guess you would say that intersection. And it's, again, this is really minor, but the technology there with the chirping sound that you hear, I think that must be a signal for impaired to cross. I've been here for many years. It seems like that technology has been in place there for many years. It's mildly annoying. I just wonder, is there any, with all the technology advancements we've had, is there any thought to changing that in some way, shape, or form to make it a little bit more pleasing sound that we have down there, or other ways to help those folks that cross the roads? Again, I know it's minor, but I just want to put that out there.
No, that's a good question. I know of the only other example I've heard when it comes to chirping. I've heard around OSU campus, they'll do an actual audible voice that's a countdown of, or it'll say walk, and then I guess that's when the chirping will start, now that I think about it. Were you thinking of one that is just a different sound, or are you thinking of one that was like telling people in language that you have so many seconds to cross?
Yeah, I don't really know what technology is out there. It's the one that's down there by Jenny's, okay, right there at the main intersection. And it seems like no matter whenever I'm there, I just constantly am hearing chirping. So I'm thinking there must be pretty good understanding of how to use that system if you're visually impaired. But it just seems like it's kind of constantly making noises down there. I just thought maybe there's something a little bit easier on the ear that could be investigated. So that's really it.
Well, I can certainly do some research and talk to our engineering staff, and I'd be interested if there are other opportunities for that. So we can look into that.
Thanks.
No problem. Thank you for the feedback. All right, I'm going to continue on to wayfinding. So wayfinding, I hope you've heard this term before. If not, it's okay. Wayfinding simply refers to information systems that help guide people and orient them in your community. So think about visual cues such as maps or directional signs and information. It could be symbology on a path. There's many different ways to help communicate to people where they are and where they want to go. Another benefit of having wayfinding is to highlight local and regional points of interest and opportunities for people to explore the Dublin community. So that can be people that live in Dublin that maybe don't know what the city has to offer, or it could be visitors who want to go to Metro Park, like Glacier Ridge, but also maybe want to see the other things that Dublin has to offer. So I think there's opportunities to get people to maybe go to historic Dublin or points of interest or retail destinations, what have you. But we'll continue. There's a lot more, but I just wanted to give you an idea of what wayfinding can be used for. As we talk about wayfinding, we've been working a lot with Central Ohio Greenways. So this is a snapshot of our community And there are trails that I put on the map to help orient you to where we are in context to them. On the right in red is the Olentangy River Trail or Olentangy Trail. That one goes all the way about to Hills Market. And if you see the dots around it, the dots are parts of the trail that are planned but they haven't been built yet. So looks like there's extension of the Olentangy Trail northward bound to happen. The Scioto Trail is taking shape. That's really dependent on us building more of it along Riverside, but also the connection south of our city. The most exciting thing to report tonight, though, is the Central Ohio Greenways Board in February voted to designate this green line on the map as a regional trail of significance. And that's the first step to getting a really good trail going through our city. There'll be short-term and long-term implications, whether it be investment in wayfinding or other improvements to the trail. We're working with them to coordinate that trail development and see if there's other opportunities to explore that Dublin can be a leader or a trailblazer on that trail development and trail programming. So I'll give you an example of the direction we're heading in. When we were talking to Central Ohio Greenways, they mentioned that our trail system is very linear in Central Ohio. So kind of like a hub and spoke, kind of like CODA, right? It all branches out from the center, but there isn't really much more to it than that. So that's because of old rail lines that have been converted, or maybe the land was just available in that respect. What they would like Dublin to do is think about bike loops. So that's what you saw earlier. And bike loops are meant to branch off from these trails and create a themed loop in a community to help people explore or just experience the community in a different way. So I'll give you an example of that. We'll zoom in a little bit more. And I added red dots, which symbolize schools from in the community. So when we're thinking about these loops, we want to think of how can we loop or how can we connect parks, schools, points of interest, what have you. So the first one we're looking at is a recreation-focused bike loop. It starts and ends at the Dublin Community Rec Center. It's about 8 miles in total length, and it's about 40 minutes at a leisurely pace, so maybe 10 to 50 miles per hour. It connects a lot of parks together, including the Metro Park. It connects schools together, Dublin Drum High School, and I know Kaufman's not really on it, but it's a very easy ride from Kaufman to the rec center. So we're going to say that counts as another school we're linking together. But needless to say, it goes through some neighborhoods, but also some wooded areas, which are very pleasant to ride through. So this is exciting for us to think about how we can better theme this and get people to branch off from that green trail and experience a little bit of Dublin as they make their way. I'm going to add another layer, and these are proposed mobility hubs. These are from that table I had a few slides ago. There are also some recommended sites from our consultant we're using based on natural opportunities in the community. So Bridge Park and Bridge Street District has a lot of mobility hubs. Teller Flats is in the mix as well, Greystone Mews. The Park and Ride is reflected. The Columbus Metropolitan Library Dublin branch, the library that we built is city owned and we maintain it. So that gives us a lot of opportunity to add to that bike parking that's found in that parking garage. Franz and Metro Place North is where there's a clustering of hotels and offices. So we want to make sure we can capture some of that. And then the high school, the rec center, city hall, the hospital, Ohio University, and Goose Ridge Metro Park. So these are all areas that we're going to start looking at site-specific designs and work with engineering and see what we can start getting going with these mobility hubs. So it will be incremental, but it's exciting as they begin to take shape. To give you an example of what kind of wayfinding we're talking about, we're not talking about signs on a post. We're talking about at-grade markings using vinyl stickers, so vinyl with adhesive sides. And they're easy to put down and very durable on our shared use paths, but they also have the opportunity to be taken and moved without much, degradation or damage to the path at all. So these are really good for getting down a loop. We can make adjustments as people write it and give us feedback to see if we can make the loop a little bit better. And then what we want to do as a long-term solution is look at stencils and glow-in-the-dark paint to use on the shared use paths. I think this is really cool. I've been able to get our engineers to buy into it. It's an opportunity to use the pass after dusk, but hopefully help with some safety along the way, because these trails most of the time are not well lit at all. So this could help with safety as in addition to being really cool looking. We're excited to try this out. Our engineering staff said we can't do it on streets, but we can do it on shared use paths. So we're going to start there and see if we can get momentum. So I think it's really exciting. To give you an idea, the glow-in-the-dark paint can last about 3 to 5 years. And the more sun it has, the more it breaks down the chemicals that make it glow in the dark, which is kind of ironic. But needless to say, if it's a maintenance of 3 to 5 years, that's really manageable for the city. So we really are excited to try this out. So for next steps, we're going to finalize the recreation bike loop, but we're also going to look at other themed loops to add to the city. Okay, number 2, don't ignore that. That was left over from when I presented to the Public Services Committee, so I apologize for that. But I'm happy to take you on a guided bike ride of it in spring once we get the wayfinding down. We do want to get lots of people to ride these bike loops and make sure that we're not missing anything, because we really want it to be the gold standard, and we want to lead the region in this kind of wayfinding. We're going to look for other opportunities for themed bike loops. So think of entertainment themed loops going through historic Dublin and British Park. Think of historical and cultural loops, which is really cool, like Indianapolis has done. Public art loops. We have so much public art, and we can partner with the Dublin Arts Council on this. Neighborhood fitness challenge loops is all for the physically active-minded people. And I personally want to do a public cemetery loop, particularly this time of year. But if we can partner with the Dublin Historical Society, maybe we can do a cool kind of, night out and bike different cemeteries and hear crazy stories of the past. I don't know. It sounds cool. But it's all about experiences, right? We want to make sure that people have unique experiences in our community. And that's what makes it really special. So do you all have any questions on wayfinding before we move on?
I think it's really cool. And you're talking about historical, the Historical Society. I'm sure Tom Holton would be real amenable to helping with this.
I hope. I think so too. All right, well, I'm not hearing anything else. So we'll have one more section, and then we can, finalize any feedback or comments.
Hey, JM.
Oh, yes.
I'm sorry, I was on mute. I was just going to say, you want to use C-Sac as your pilot before you, take the Public Services Committee out. We could do that for you.
Would you want to ride some? Do you think members would like to ride some of the loops and give feedback?
I would.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Well, I think it's getting too cold, but I think in spring we should definitely plan some bike rides.
Yeah, definitely.
Oh, I would love that. I really would. So I'm going to take you up on that.
Okay.
Thank you. All right, so let's close out this last part with complete and smart streets. Again, we lean on the Mid-Ohio Regional Planning Commission for a lot of this policy, and they give us best practices. So complete streets would be something that Dublin has done for a long time, which is incorporate sidewalks and shared use paths as they build new roadways, at least public roadways. There's best practices, but we do it the Dublin way, so it's all good. We support complete streets, so that was our resolution saying that. We passed a resolution of support for Morpsey's smart street policy, so that's taking things a step further and saying, yes, add sidewalks and add shared use paths and make it for everybody to use, but think about fiber broadband and think about other things that we can do. Columbus has a policy where they do a dig once policy. So if you're going to do work on a street, then make sure you fix all the infrastructure and put all the, high-tech stuff that you need to put in there. So you only dig once and that's done. So I think there's things like that we can begin to look at. This resolution, though, basically directs the city departments to consider incorporate smart street technology whenever feasible. So right now there's a smart intersection project going on. That's a good example of that. A long-term policy consideration is a Vision Zero policy. If you're wondering what that is, Vision Zero started in Sweden in 1997. And it was a way to look at traffic fatalities and serious injuries and think about ways that we could minimize them. Sometimes it's policy and enforcement, like lowering the speed limit on a roadway. Sometimes it's design solutions, so maybe redoing a roadway so it's safer for bicyclists and pedestrians. There's a few different ways you can tackle the goal of lowering fatalities and serious injuries. So we do a lot of that already in Dublin, but we want to formalize it and have more focus on what are ways that we can look at the data and begin to make improvements so we have a safer community. That's what Vision Zero is all about. It's going to take coordination with the police department on the enforcement side and a few other departments. So we're working on internal meetings now to get everyone's buy-in before we get Public Services Committee and Council and probably you all to say, yes, this is a good idea, or no, this is not a good idea. So we're hopeful that we can continue the conversations and land somewhere. So we're going to continue to work with MORPC on complete and smart streets, and behind the scenes work with staff on a Vision Zero policy that we can bring to the public and get their input for. So that is it for my presentation on mobility. It was a lot. I am so glad you're still with me and you followed along. I'm happy to answer any final questions or take any feedback.
What would you see as a smart street opportunity within the city of Dublin?
Definitely continue to expand the Dublink fiber broadband, but I think the smart intersections could be interesting. So I've seen different deployments of that technology. The one I like a lot is it could count how many people or cars are waiting and then adjust the time of lights based on how many cars and people there are. That's an example, right? But there's many other examples.
Well, I attended about 2 years ago a presentation by the city of Marysville, what they were doing at some intersections. I don't know if they ever implemented it or not, but I know they're looking for volunteers.
They do have a plan. I'm not sure how far they are in implementation, but you're exactly right. That's a good example of a nearby community that's doing that.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, thank you very much.
Hey, JM, I read one time that Dublin was going to attempt to try to take the 18-wheelers away from the downtown area and make it more conducive for walkers and such. Could you remind me on what the plan is behind that?
So you said there's a plan to divert 18-wheeler traffic out of downtown or out of the historic area?
Yes, I thought I read that at some point, but I may have been mistaken. But I just didn't. I was wondering if there's anything on the books about that.
I'm not familiar with that. I don't know if Nick is. Nick, do you know much about that?
Yeah, I'm not familiar with anything, but we could certainly follow up with that. I mean, I'll reach out to our traffic engineers and see if that's ever been something, that was initiated at, either the council or staff level. I would think that from a long-term strategy, that the purpose would be to, the long-term goal with like a thoroughfare plan, generally speaking, would be to try to divert that traffic as much as possible. So maybe it was sort of an aside mention in reference to sort of long-term plans with the city. But Jim, regardless, I'll follow up with our traffic engineers and see if they're able to share any information relative to that and see if.
Okay, yeah, I was just curious.
Hey, Nick.
Yeah.
So we heard all this good information. Is there anything specific that will come to C-Sac for us to look at, assess, work on, input on?
So
there's respect to mobility.
Yeah.
Nick, do you want to answer that or you want me to answer that?
I can a little bit. I mean, certainly that's up to JM. I mean, one of the things I try to always make and sort of gently remind staff, and I know that JM's very aware because he and I have both brought many things before you all over the last few years. So is just a reminder that this commission is here and available to provide feedback and help vet some projects and so forth. So certainly with the history of sort of reviewing and providing extensive input on some of the, particularly with bike share and shared use path and bike related projects, I think if there's an opportunity to bring some specific items to this commission, we would definitely look to do that. JM is, I think, very, very aware that you all are here. So, JM, I don't know if you have anything specific that you might look to bring to this commission. And I wasn't at the Public Services Committee, so I wasn't sure what maybe the do outs or follow up steps were from that. But if you have anything that that you want to share now, or we can always follow up with the commission as well.
Yes, I have some ideas. I also have some homework for the commission, which I hope you'll do. But the homework would be tell all your friends and family and colleagues and everyone you know about our microtransit services. We're here to provide that service, and we want more ridership. So whether they work in Dublin or if they are aging in place or have a disability, please, please, please let them, send my information to them. I'd love to talk to them about how we can accommodate their needs, because that's what we're here for. For the bike share, we may ask the commission for a letter of support. So that's down the road, but I think that might be a good idea for you to get involved. I'm going down each list of the priority areas. For mobility hubs, we could probably bring some designs that we cook up and see how you respond to them and if we're missing anything. So that would be something down the road. I don't know when, but I think next year we can come back and see how you react to some of our designs. For wayfinding, we're going to go on those bike rides. I'm taking you up on that in the springtime. So I think that would be really good for you to train and do bicycling over the wintertime. I'm just kidding. It's not going to be that bad. It's going to be leisurely rides that are a couple miles. But it'd be so nice for you to join us because you can provide your perspective. And if we're, miss anything or we didn't think of anything, you could be there as that voice and those eyes to do that. So that'd be tremendous help for staff. And also invite people who don't live in Dublin to try out our pass and see, is it dummy proof, quote unquote. Maybe that's not the best word to put it, but is there anything that we're missing that if you're a resident, you would miss, but if you're visiting, you would pick up on, stuff like that. And then if you see any examples of cool wayfinding or placemakings, email me, send me the pictures or article, whatever, because I'd love to incorporate it as feedback or for us to think about as we design these systems.
Okay. Well, thank you very much.
I have just a quick question. I don't know, in the wayfinding, I was thinking about like a kind of app right now. Right now, people are using like Google Maps and for the direction, but we have so much of, the bike path. I was always thinking about it. So when I run, I want to run like a 3 miles on the running path, but many of the time I lost it just to find the way back to, like Google or something. So I'm not able to explore everything. But is there anything that you guys on the road, like we can kind of develop an app, instead of using the regular road, just to use a bike path, or walking or, biking, anything kind of thing, like 3 miles or 4 miles kind of loop?
I would love that feedback so we can program stuff like that.
Right.
And I think that would be great for community fitness challenge that we could do the wayfinding markings, but also work with our, we have a Dublin app that we could possibly add more functionality to that can incorporate the wayfinding. So in the sense that you can have the wayfinding on the pass, but also wayfinding on your app. And
that's correct.
We can program it around, like you said, if there's 2 or 5 mile loops that align with your fitness regimen, then that would be good to know so we can accommodate that.
Right. So how the Google right now calculates, but if I want like 3 miles, from where I are, just give me a path and I can just finish it off. So that would be nice. And I want to bring this one up. When I see the loop that I got the name, do you guys remember the Hyperloop project a couple of years ago? Do you guys see any kind of progress, or you guys anything happening? Because I never hear anything after, I think, about almost 2 years now, I guess. You heard about the Hyperloop?
I know about Hyperloop.
Right.
Nick, do you want to answer that, or do you want me to answer that?
You can answer it, because I think most of that, Vivek, I think the short answer to that, and Jam might know a little bit more about it, but I think a lot of that hinges on MORPC's progress. There's sort of the lead on that project, and certainly the plan is if it does come through, that it would come through the city of Dublin at some point. There would be a stop here, but I'm not familiar with any recent progress that has been made on that. So, Jam, do you? I mean, maybe you know a little bit more about it, but
The most I know about it is MORPC has been working with regional partners to do the Hyperloop from here through Fort Wayne, Indiana to Chicago, and then also to Pittsburgh, to east of us. I know not for the Pittsburgh portion, but from Columbus to Chicago, MORPC has been working on doing tier 1 and tier 2 environmental impact studies, which are required for federal dollars. And that is supposed to be used for Hyperloop, but also for high-speed rail. So it's the same corridor for both technologies. And the thought is if we can do an environmental impact study for the corridor, then that would satisfy for both technologies. So be both for high-speed rail and for Hyperloop. Whichever opportunity comes quicker, we'll be prepared because we had the studies already done and it's the same corridor. So if that makes sense, we're looking at two different ways to connect regionally, and the studies are either done or underway. So after the studies are done, that would allow us to get closer to federal funding, if that makes sense. But I think it's going to be years down the road, unfortunately.
Okay, I just I never hear about it. Thought okay, nobody was talking about recent days, so I just wanted to get a quick update on it. Thank you.
You're welcome. Well, I just want to say thank you so much for everyone's feedback and comments. I really do appreciate it. Feel free to email me anything comes to mind after the meeting. We welcome it, and it helped us a lot with our efforts underway. So thank you.
Thank you, Jam.
Thank you.
You, Jim.
All right, I'm gonna stop sharing my screen. Hold on a second. Or if Nick is gonna take it from me. Okay, here we go. Stop sharing.
Steve, you're muted.
Thank you very much.
Oh, no problem. We all do it.
Yeah. Excuse me. Next topic was future C-Sac topics. I don't know, Nick, if you compiled anything yet, or this was to keep it in, kind of fresh, things that we could be working on when our queue becomes 0.
Yeah,
So-
give me 1 minute really quickly. I'm gonna share. Okay. So as I think I committed to the commission, at a previous meeting, I've been working on putting together a calendar. I'm going to try to keep it as probably basic as possible. And so it'll probably just look something like this. I'll bring it forward to you all at our next meeting and sort of finalize that with you all. And then the thought was just to continue keeping a running tally of sort of what do we have planned for our next couple of meetings, what's on the docket, with the idea being that we can sort of keep in our sights what's on the horizon. And then ultimately, I know that you all have given me some really good topics, areas that you're interested in, areas that you think might serve as a good project. There's other things I know that I've mentioned to you all that have been floating out there, either with council or with staff, that may come forward and be brought forward as a requested project for you all to take on as well. So what I'll probably do is just here down toward the bottom, put a running tally of that. I'll send it out to you all and see if you just want to share any feedback you have on it between now and our next meeting. But right now, what we do have scheduled is next meeting, you'll hear from Tom Hershey, who manages the city's emergency management program. And so I know that that's been an area of interest for some of you, and I think it's obviously a very pertinent conversation to have. And it's a good opportunity for us to have, it'll be nice, especially with these meetings being live streamed now, we'll have a good, it'll be a good opportunity to have some live and some documented content that shares sort of what all the city does as it relates to emergency management. I think it's one of those things that the city is always working on and we're preparing for, but maybe we don't necessarily share it with the community as regularly as we could. And so you'll hear from him, and he has a presentation he'll bring forward and certainly answer any questions that you all might have, and probably look to maybe get a little bit of feedback from you all as well. So that should be an interesting conversation. And then, I'm working on following up on a couple of the things that you all have brought forward. I know there have been quite a few parks related items out there. And I know that our parks team as well on the back end is certainly looking to do an update to some of their strategic plans and sort of overall parks plans as well. So I have a plan to sort of follow up with them. We're right in the middle of sort of budget season for all of our senior leadership. So I think they're all just sort of focused on making sure everything is getting through on that end. And then we can all sort of, as a organization, sort of refocus and figure out what our priorities are coming forward in 2021. And hopefully it can't be worse than 2020, I think is what we're all thinking. But I think we all know better than to necessarily think that it has to be better. So I think we're all hoping that we'll eventually be in person here soon, but we'll continue here in the virtual format, and I'll work on identifying some future topics as well. I know that there has been a couple of items that have been brought forward and suggested, I think just offhandedly on a staff perspective, to say, hey, this might be a potential Community Services Advisory Commission item. So I know I mentioned maybe at a previous meeting, either our last meeting or 2 meetings ago, that there had been some discussion about how our Public Works team prioritizes the cleaning of both streets and shared use path. And, is there an opportunity for us to relook at how that is, how we organize that and how we approach it? One of the opportunities we could do too, if that were brought forward as a formal project or a formal topic for the commission, is we could work to sort of advertise one of the meetings publicly a little bit more. I mean, certainly we advertise all of our meetings, but I don't know how many people are out there thinking, I wonder what Community Services Advisory Commission is up to, other than maybe our former members. So this would be something that we'd maybe put, work with our communications team to push out a little bit more and encourage folks to write in comments. And certainly we'd probably get some complaints. I know when it comes to snow clearing, people certainly have thoughts when it comes to that stuff. So that's something that's out there that might be a pertinent topic for the commission to take on. And certainly, the nice thing as well is, like Steve said, he and Kirby both did a really nice job yesterday evening in bringing forward the commission's recommendation. And it's always just a nice reminder for City Council to recall that, they have you all here as a resource to take on these types of topics. So they're now aware that you finished up a topic. And so certainly if they have something that comes to the forefront at a council meeting here in the next month or two, that certainly you're available to take on a new project as well. So, the screen that's shared now, this is sort of what we have on the forefront. Like I said, I'll send this out to you all. And if you want to give any feedback and thoughts, just let me know. But I'll probably just try to keep it simple, and in the future meetings, we'll attach it to the agenda so you all can see, and we can just continue to use this as a resource to guide our way through it.
Okay. Now, Nick, several of us have provided suggestions on things we possibly could work on.
Mm-hmm.
Is this going to be part of your calendar, like a log that would say, here's the idea, and was it C-Sac driven, or was it, driven by staff, or driven by council? Well, if it's driven by council, then it's pretty obvious.
Yeah, I'll probably put that toward the bottom of the calendar, and that'll be before I send it out to you all. I'll add that in here so you can sort of take a look at it and say, "Hey, Nick, I think this looks dumb. I don't like it," or "Hey, this looks great. We really like the way this looks." So that'll be my plan, is to always have those topics that have been brought forward either as an area of interest or an area of need or what have you. That it'll always be a part of this calendar. And the commission can always say, hey, this was a thing that, Elizabeth was really into, but then she left us. Nobody else really is interested in it. You can remove it, or, we can always remove things and add things as we go along for each meeting. So
Okay.
that would be the plan with this calendar. Yes.
Good. Okay, next item is any other items of interest anybody on the commission would like to bring up? This is a potpourri. Anything you'd like to bring up? Anybody?
Hey, Steve, this is related to, I watched the YouTube that you presented the proposal, and it was very effective. And I'm new to how the workings go, but I was wondering from your standpoint, Nick's standpoint, it seemed like we had covered that the budget for this effort would come out of that kind of community improvement grant budget that seemed to be, easy to pick up this. And it seemed like that the city council sent it back like to finance to check to see if there was money available. Is that just because we're in the budget planning cycle right now and that community grants budget may be not funded well? Is that why they kind of kicked it back to finance? I'm just kind of curious. It felt like it was a slam dunk on how we're approaching it.
Yeah, so Jim, I think ultimately they referred it to the finance. I think what they wanted to do was refer to a committee in general. And so I think because the work left to be done is primarily on some of the parameters that go with it, I think, and they're just because of where their discussion went, I think the first thing that popped into their mind was finance committee. And so that's where they sent it. I may suggest to them that they send it to public services committee instead, but that I don't know. Truth be told, I'm not entirely clear how that process works. So if it has to be with finance committee, then that's totally appropriate. There's right now currently, there's those three committees that I think I mentioned earlier. So there you have finance committee, public services committee, and a community development committee. And I think community development committee maybe oversees Beautify Your Neighborhood grant. Finance committee oversees, they oversee one as well. So my thought was it might be appropriate for public services or one of the other committees that's not overseeing one of these grants to maybe be the one that works on it and maybe provides the oversight. Because ultimately, the process I think that will take place will be that, if they do ultimately accept the recommendation or what staff brings forward to them based on this commission's discussion, is that one of those council committees would be the oversight group where those applications would come forward to ultimately to grant those funds. The funds themselves would be pulled from our capital budget. So we would be able to allocate the money sort of thereafter. So even if the operating budget gets passed and there's no inclusion of this specific grant, we'd still be able to put something together without having to wait for another budget cycle, is my understanding from Matt Stifler, our finance director, having a conversation with him. So not necessarily any concerns there. So ultimately, I think referring it to the committee was appropriate because I think one of those committees will be the oversight group for the pilot grant program. And so ultimately, I think they went finance committee because that was just sort of where their discussion was, and they just wanted to sort of delegate it and move on to the next topic. So does that sort of answer your question?
Yeah, thank you. Yes, thank you.
Okay.
Anybody have anything else? Well, if not, our next meeting is November 10th. And if I don't hear anything else, then our meeting is adjourned. Thank you for your participation, and we'll see you in November.
Thank you all.
Have a
You
good
have a wonderful
month.
evening.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Bye,
everybody.
guys.
Yeah.
Be safe, everyone. Stay and healthy.